He found her washing dishes in his kitchen. She said, "I owe you my life, let me work it off." Asen had always been a man of routine. Every morning he woke up early, brewed his coffee, and read the newspaper before heading to work. He enjoyed the quiet moments of his apartment, where everything was in its place, and life felt manageable and predictable. On this particular day, he returned home later than usual, exhausted from the long hours at the office. The city streets had been crowded, the air heavy with humidity, and by the time he reached his door, he was longing only for the comfort of his home. As he inserted his key into the lock, he thought about the dinner he would prepare for himself, something simple, a sandwich or perhaps some pasta. He pushed the door open and stepped inside, but what he saw made him stop in his tracks. There in the middle of his kitchen was a young woman. She was bent over the sink, her sleeves rolled up, washing dishes with a focused intensity. The faint smell of soap and the gentle clinking of plates filled the room. Asen's first instinct was disbelief. How had someone entered his apartment without his knowledge? The woman looked up briefly, startled, her eyes wide and nervous. I owe you my life," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Let me work it off." Asen froze, unsure how to respond. His mind raced with questions. Who was she? How did she know him? And most importantly, why was she in his kitchen? He had never seen her before in his life, and yet she was speaking as if there was a debt between them, a debt he didn't even know existed. "Wait, what?" he managed to say finally, his voice a mix of confusion and disbelief. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" Sana, the young woman, did not look away. She kept her hands on the dishes, but her eyes pleaded for understanding. "I don't have much time to explain, but I promise everything I do will be honest. You saved my life once, and I can never repay that properly. This is all I can do, work, help, anything to make it right." Asen felt a strange pull of curiosity and caution. He had always considered himself helpful, but he did not recall any incident that would have involved saving someone's life. Yet, there was a sincerity in her tone, a kind of raw honesty that was difficult to ignore. He decided to step back and let her speak. As he watched her continue her work, he noticed the careful way she handled the dishes, the way her fingers moved with precision, almost like she had been doing this for years. She wasn't careless or clumsy. There was a determination in her movements that suggested more than just a simple act of washing dishes. Asen's initial irritation slowly turned into curiosity. Sana spoke again, her voice calmer now. "I was in an accident a few months ago. You were there, you didn't know me, but you helped. You stayed with me until help arrived, and because of that, I survived. I don't even know how to thank you properly, but I can't stop thinking about it. Let me repay you, even in small ways." Asen's mind flashed back, trying to recall any event that matched her description. He remembered a day when he had been walking home from work and noticed a crowd gathered near the street. Someone had been injured in an accident, a young woman hit by a motorbike. He had called for help, stayed with her, and made sure the ambulance arrived safely. That must have been her. He swallowed, feeling a mix of emotions, surprise, guilt for not remembering sooner, and a strange sense of responsibility. "So you've been following me?" he asked cautiously. "No," she replied quickly. "I didn't follow you, I just wanted to find a way to repay you. I didn't know how to reach you, and when I finally found your address, I thought maybe if I can help in any way, I can feel like I'm doing something right." Asen rubbed his forehead. He was a private man, someone who preferred quiet and solitude. The idea of a stranger entering his life so abruptly was overwhelming. Yet, the sincerity in her eyes, the quiet desperation in her tone, made him hesitate before telling her to leave. "Look," he said finally, choosing his words carefully. "I appreciate what you're saying, but I don't know if this is the right way. You can't just come into someone's home and start working for them." Sana paused, looking up at him. Her eyes reflected a mix of hope and fear. "I know it's unusual, I know it's strange. But I feel like I have to do this. I can't live with myself knowing I haven't tried to repay you in some way. Even if it's small, even if it's just helping you around the house, I need to do it." There was a quiet intensity in her voice that Asen could not ignore. He saw determination not just in her words, but in her actions. She wasn't asking for charity or sympathy. She was offering herself honestly, ready to work for something she believed she owed. After a long pause, Asen finally said, "Fine, you can stay for now. But only under one condition, honesty. If I sense anything less than truth from you, I'll ask you to leave immediately." Sana's face lit up with relief. Thank you, I promise I will be honest in everything I do. You won't regret this. From that moment, an unusual routine began in Asen's apartment. Every day after work, he would return to find Sana busy with household chores. She cooked simple meals, cleaned meticulously, and handled small tasks without complaint. At first, the dynamic was awkward. Asen wasn't used to having someone around constantly, and Sana wasn't accustomed to living under someone else's roof. But slowly, small moments began to soften the tension. Sana had a way of asking questions about his day that wasn't intrusive but genuine. She listened when he spoke, not just nodding but responding thoughtfully, showing interest in his life. Asen, in turn, found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years. He shared stories from his childhood, memories of his family, and even little anecdotes from work that made him laugh quietly to himself. There were also moments of shared humor. Asen would often catch Sana humming to herself while working, or slipping a little flour onto her nose while cooking. They would exchange small laughs, sometimes at nothing at all, and in those moments the apartment no longer felt like a place of strict order and solitude. It began to feel alive. Through these interactions, Asen also began to notice the strength in Sana's character. She had faced hardships he could barely imagine, yet she carried herself with dignity and grace. She didn't complain, she didn't seek pity, and she worked tirelessly not because she was asked to, but because she wanted to honor the debt she felt she owed. Asen couldn't help but feel a growing sense of respect for her. Her determination reminded him of his younger self, someone who had once faced challenges without fear, someone who had believed in action over words. He realized that while she owed him her life and her mind, he owed her understanding and patience in return. One evening, as they sat quietly after dinner, Asen looked at her and said, "You know, I don't think you need to repay anything. You've already done more than you realize by simply being honest and willing to work. That means more than I can explain." Sana smiled softly, but her eyes still held that trace of worry. "I can't help how I feel," she replied. "I survived because of you. If I can't find a way to repay that, I don't think I can forgive myself." Asen shook his head gently, understanding but unable to change the way she felt. He realized that this was only the beginning. The bond between them was forming slowly, built on trust, gratitude, and the small, everyday moments that made life feel less lonely. As the night settled over the city, Asen found himself reflecting on the strange twists of life. How one day, a simple walk home could change everything. How a stranger could enter his life and alter it in ways he had never imagined. And how sometimes, the most unexpected encounters could bring lessons of compassion, trust, and connection that no ordinary day could ever offer. The night passed quietly, with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional distant sounds of the city drifting through the window. Asen lay in bed, thinking about tomorrow and the days that would follow. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing. Life had a way of surprising you when you least expected it. And sometimes, those surprises could bring people together in ways that changed both of their lives forever. The days after Sana began staying at Asen's apartment were unusual but quietly transformative. At first, the rhythm of life felt strange for both of them. Asen, who had grown used to the silence of his home, now had another presence around him. The small sounds of someone moving in the kitchen, the clinking of utensils, and the soft hum of conversation broke the stillness he had always valued. For Sana, every day brought new challenges. Living in someone else's home required adjustment, but she approached each task with careful thought and determination, refusing to let discomfort or fear take over. Asen observed her silently at first. He noticed the precision in the way she handled each chore, folding laundry neatly, arranging kitchen items just so, wiping counters in smooth, deliberate strokes. It reminded him of the care one would take in tending a garden. Every small action mattered, and every effort was meaningful. He found himself quietly impressed, though he would never say it out loud. Sana, on her part, made efforts to learn about Asen's preferences. She discovered which meals he liked, how he preferred his coffee, and even which corner of the living room he liked to sit in when reading. There was a gentleness in her attentiveness, not servile but thoughtful. It showed her gratitude in ways words could not. Every gesture, no matter how small, reflected her deep sense of responsibility and appreciation. Gradually, The awkwardness that had dominated their first encounter began to fade. They started to share small conversations, mostly about ordinary things, the weather, work, and daily routines. Asen found himself listening more than he had in a long time. He had always been a private man, keeping thoughts and feelings to himself. But with Sana, the conversations felt safe, unhurried, and sincere. There was no judgment, no hidden motives, only honesty. One evening, as Asen returned from work, he found Sana sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she had made for him. "I thought you might like this," she said, offering the cup with a shy smile. Her gesture was simple, yet it carried warmth, thoughtfulness, and care. Asen accepted it quietly, feeling a strange sense of comfort that he hadn't expected. "You didn't have to do this," he said, taking a slow sip. "I know," Sana replied softly, "but I wanted to. It feels right to do something for you." That small moment became the start of a subtle but profound shift in their relationship. Asen began to notice little things about her. The way she laughed quietly when she thought he wasn't looking. The way her eyes sparkled with curiosity when learning something new about his routines. And the careful attention she gave to even the simplest tasks. Sana, too, noticed him more, his small gestures, the quiet way he observed the world, and his hidden kindness that often went unnoticed. They began sharing stories about their pasts, though cautiously at first. Asen spoke about his childhood, his education, and his early years in the city. He spoke about his parents, now gone, and the small family traditions that he still cherished. Sana listened intently, occasionally asking questions, showing genuine interest in his memories. In return, she shared parts of her story, her struggles growing up, the accident, and the sense of responsibility she felt for surviving. Through these conversations, Asen learned more about her resilience than he could have imagined. She had faced challenges that would have broken many people, yet she carried herself with quiet dignity. She did not complain, nor did she seek sympathy. Instead, she focused on what she could do in the present, how she could help, and how she could be useful. Asen found himself silently admiring her strength, though he kept his thoughts to himself. The bond between them grew slowly, shaped by shared routines and small acts of kindness. Mornings became less hurried as Sana prepared breakfast while Asen sipped his coffee. Evenings were spent in quiet companionship, with Asen reading and Sana tidying the apartment, or occasionally joining him to discuss a news article or a story she had read. There was no pressure, no rush, just the comfort of knowing someone else was there, quietly sharing the space of his life. Despite the calm surface, there were moments of tension. Asen sometimes questioned whether it was right to let her stay, whether he was enabling her sense of debt rather than helping her find independence. Sana, on her part, struggled with feelings of inadequacy, worried that no amount of work could ever truly repay the life she believed he had saved. Yet, they never spoke harshly or argued. The tension was subtle, expressed in quiet thoughts and occasional pauses in conversation. One afternoon, a small incident brought a wave of laughter that neither of them would forget. Sana had been trying to prepare lunch, and in her focus, she accidentally spilled a bit of flour on the counter. As she moved to clean it up, a small cloud of flour puffed into the air, dusting both her and Asen lightly. For a moment, they looked at each other in silence. Then Asen chuckled quietly, and Sana laughed, a clear, melodic sound that filled the kitchen. That moment of shared humor, so simple yet so genuine, seemed to break down another wall between them. Days turned into weeks, and the routines became comfortable, almost natural. Asen began to realize that the presence of another person in his home was not a disruption, but a subtle enrichment. The apartment no longer felt empty or silent. It was alive with small sounds, small interactions, and small connections that mattered more than he could have imagined. Sana's growth was equally noticeable. She became more confident, more relaxed in the apartment, and more open in her conversations. She no longer approached tasks with the tense precision of someone trying to repay a debt, but with a sense of purpose and pride. She began to see her efforts not as obligations, but as contributions to a shared life, however temporary or uncertain it might have seemed at first. Asen, too, changed in ways he did not expect. He learned patience, understanding, and the value of human connection. He realized that life was not just about routine and order, but about the moments that broke the monotony. Unexpected encounters, shared laughter, and quiet companionship. He began to appreciate her not just as someone who owed him a life, but as a person in her own right, with thoughts, feelings, and dreams. One rainy evening, as they sat by the window, watching the drops race down the glass, Asen spoke softly. "You know, I didn't expect any of this, not the company, not the stories, not even the laughter, but I'm glad it happened." Sana looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the room. "Neither did I," she admitted. "I thought this was about repayment. I didn't realize it could be something else, something human." And in that moment they both understood. Their connection was no longer defined solely by debt or obligation. It was defined by shared experience, mutual respect, and the quiet recognition that two lives, once separate and solitary, had begun to intersect in meaningful ways. Even as the weeks passed, life continued in its steady rhythm. Asen went to work and Sana continued her chores, but the interactions between them deepened. Small gestures, a cup of tea, a shared smile, a story told across the kitchen table, became the threads that wove their lives together. Each day added another layer of trust, another moment of understanding, and another reason to appreciate the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. There were still moments of uncertainty. Both knew that their lives were not fully aligned, that the past could not be erased, and that the future held unknown challenges. But those uncertainties did not diminish the bond they were forming. If anything, they strengthened it, reminding them that human connection was never simple, never predictable, and always worth the effort. By the end of the second month, Asen and Sana had found a balance. The apartment had become a shared space, not just in physical terms, but emotionally as well. Each had learned something from the other. Asen learned openness, compassion, and the subtle joy of shared life. Sana learned confidence, trust, and the quiet satisfaction of contributing meaningfully to someone else's world. And though neither of them could predict what the next day, or the next challenge, would bring, they both knew that they were no longer alone. That knowledge, simple and profound, was enough to carry them forward. The peaceful rhythm that had settled into Asen's apartment was not meant to last forever. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the living room, there was a knock at the door. It was sharp, insistent, and carried a weight that made both Asen and Sana pause. Asen, cautious by nature, frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. He opened the door to find a young man standing there, someone with a look that was both familiar and troubling. "Sana," he said sharply, "we need to talk." His voice had a firmness that suggested authority, but also an underlying anger. Sana froze, her hand gripping Asen's arm lightly. Her face paled, and for the first time in weeks there was visible fear in her eyes. It's nothing," she stammered. "Please don't." Asen stepped slightly in front of her, his protective instincts kicking in. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "Why are you here?" The man's gaze flicked between them, narrowing. "You know who I am." "I'm here because she owes me answers." Sana's hands trembled, and she whispered almost to herself, "I didn't want this to come here." Asen realized that the quiet life they had been building together was about to face its first real challenge. Sana's past, which she had tried to keep carefully contained, had found them, and with it came uncertainty, fear, and the risk of misunderstanding. The man, whose name was revealed to be Rashid, was someone from Sana's past who had played a complicated role in her life before the accident. He wasn't threatening in a violent sense, but his presence carried tension. He had questions, demands, and expectations, all of which placed Sana in a position of stress and discomfort. Asen, protective but cautious, had to navigate the situation carefully, balancing his concern for Sana with the reality that they could not simply ignore Rashid. Sana tried to explain, her voice barely above a whisper. This is from my past. It's complicated. It's not about you or Asen. Please just go." But Rashid was persistent. "I need to know the truth," he said. "I need to understand why you disappeared, why you left everything behind. You can't just run from this." Asen felt a surge of frustration, not at Rashid, but at the sudden intrusion into the life he had been carefully building. He looked at Sana, who was trying to hold herself together, and realized that this was not just an inconvenience. It was a test of their trust, patience, and ability to face difficult realities together. "Why don't you both sit down?" Asen suggested cautiously. He gestured toward the living room, hoping to diffuse the tension. "Let's talk calmly." Sana hesitated but nodded, knowing that confrontation was inevitable. Rashid followed, his eyes sharp, but there was a strange respect in the way he kept his distance. As they sat, Sana began to speak, carefully recounting the events that had led to this moment. Her childhood had been challenging, filled with instability and fear. Before the accident, she had been involved in situations that were difficult to navigate, and Rashid had been connected to those events. She had left not out of malice but out of necessity. She had needed to survive, to find safety, and to rebuild her life. Asen listened quietly, absorbing every word. He felt a mix of admiration for her courage and concern for the complications that her past could bring. Rashid, on the other hand, seemed to be processing more than just the facts. His expression showed a combination of frustration, confusion, and reluctant understanding. After a long, tense conversation, Rashid finally spoke. "I don't agree with everything you did," he said, turning to Sana. "But I see now that you were trying to survive. I can't undo the past and I can't control what you've become. I just needed to hear it from you directly." Sana nodded, relief washing over her. The weight of secrecy, guilt, and fear that she had carried for so long began to lift slightly. Asen felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, not because the situation was fully resolved, but because Sana's honesty and courage had created space for understanding. Even as the tension eased, Asen and Sana knew that challenges were not over. They were reminded that life was rarely simple and that the past could reach forward in unexpected ways. But this encounter also highlighted the strength of their bond. They were learning to face difficulties together, to communicate openly, and to trust each other even when circumstances were uncomfortable or frightening. The days that followed were marked by reflection. Asen noticed how Sana carried herself differently now, more confident, more self-assured. The incident with Rashid had forced her to confront parts of her life she had avoided, and in doing so, she had grown stronger. Asen, too, reflected on his own reactions. He realized that his initial caution had given way to genuine concern and protectiveness, feelings that were deepening as their lives intertwined. There were moments of vulnerability that emerged naturally from this experience. One evening, as the rain tapped softly against the window, Sana spoke quietly. "I was afraid. I thought my past would ruin everything here. I didn't want to drag you into it." Asen placed a hand gently on hers. "You haven't ruined anything. Life isn't about perfection. It's about honesty, courage, and the way we face what comes. You've shown all of that." That simple conversation marked another turning point. The incident with Rashid, though stressful, had deepened their understanding of each other. They saw each other not just as people connected by circumstance, but as individuals capable of trust, resilience, and compassion. As the weeks passed, the threat from Sana's past diminished. Rashid no longer appeared, and the life that had seemed disrupted began to regain a sense of calm. Yet the experience left a lasting impression. Both Asen and Sana recognized that life could be unpredictable, and that challenges, though uncomfortable, could strengthen bonds rather than weaken them. Their routine, once simple and quiet, now carried layers of meaning. Every meal shared, every conversation held, and every small act of kindness became a testament to their growing trust. Asen noticed how Sana's presence had changed the apartment, not just filling it with life, but also creating a space where honesty and vulnerability were valued. Sana, in turn, felt a growing sense of belonging, a realization that she was more than her past, and that she could contribute to someone else's life in meaningful ways. There were still small moments of tension, minor disagreements, misunderstandings, and the occasional lingering fear of the past, but these were now met with patience and communication. Asen and Sana had learned to navigate difficulties together, to face uncertainty without panic, and to support each other through the emotional turbulence that life inevitably brought. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Asen noticed how naturally their interactions had become. Sana passed him ingredients with a quiet smile, and he found himself laughing at a small joke she made. The ease of their companionship was remarkable, a stark contrast to the initial awkwardness of her first arrival. They had moved from strangers to partners in daily life, bound not by obligation alone, but by shared experience, mutual respect, and growing affection. The months continued to unfold with the quiet rhythm of daily life, punctuated by small joys and occasional challenges. Each day added depth to their relationship, strengthening their connection in ways neither could have anticipated. They had learned that trust was built gradually, that honesty was more valuable than perfection, and that true bonds were formed not by circumstance alone, but by the way two people chose to navigate life together. And as Asen watched Sana one afternoon, humming softly while arranging books on a shelf, he realized that the unexpected encounter that had begun with confusion and fear had transformed into something far more profound. It was not simply about debt or obligation anymore. It was about two lives intersecting, learning from each other, and finding in one another a sense of connection that neither had experienced before. For Sana, the challenges of the past had taught her resilience and courage. For Asen, her presence had opened his heart to empathy, understanding, and the subtle joys of shared life. Together, they had faced tension, uncertainty, and fear, and emerged stronger, more connected, and more aware of the profound impact that trust, honesty, and compassion could have on the human experience. In the quiet of the evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Asen and Sana shared a moment of calm reflection. They knew that life would continue to test them, that unexpected challenges would arise, and that their bond would be shaped by the choices they made in response. But in that moment, they simply appreciated the journey they had taken together. The laughter, the small victories, the moments of vulnerability, and the quiet, steadfast presence of one another. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, both felt a growing confidence that together, they could face whatever came next. The lessons of the past, the challenges of the present, and the promise of the future had brought them closer, forging a connection that was both resilient and deeply human, a connection that would carry them forward into the next chapters of their lives, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever fate had in store. Life slowly began to settle back into a gentle rhythm in Asen's apartment. The tension caused by Sana's past had faded, leaving behind a quieter, deeper understanding between them. The once uneasy silence was now replaced by comfortable conversation, laughter, and the subtle rhythm of shared life. Both of them had grown, learning to navigate not only the challenges of their individual pasts, but also the challenges of building trust and connection. Asen noticed the change in himself first. He had always considered himself a solitary man, careful, disciplined, and distant. He had valued routine and order above all else. Yet the presence of Sana had taught him something profound. Life was not merely about following rules or maintaining solitude. It was about connection, empathy, and moments that made existence feel meaningful. He found joy in the small, daily interactions that had once seemed trivial, the way Sana hummed while washing dishes, the careful preparation of meals, and the thoughtful gestures she made without asking for recognition. Sana, too, had changed. She no longer approached each day with the sense of burdened obligation that had defined her first weeks in the apartment. Instead, she embraced her role with pride and purpose, recognizing that her contributions were valuable not because of debt, but because they mattered in the context of shared life. The sense of gratitude she had carried for Asen's act of saving her life had transformed into genuine care, trust, and emotional investment in their connection. One evening, after a long day, they found themselves in the living room, sitting side by side on the sofa. The soft glow of the lamp cast a warm light across the room, and the quiet sounds of the city outside provided a calm backdrop. Sana looked at Asen, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Do you ever think about how strange all this is?" she asked gently. "How one moment can change everything," Asen nodded thoughtfully. "I do. I never expected someone to just walk into my life like this, and yet I'm glad you did. Life feels different now, better somehow." Sana's smile widened slightly, and she reached out to touch his hand lightly. "I feel the same way. I thought I owed you everything, but I realize now that we're both learning from each other, and maybe that's more important than repayment." The words hung in the air, carrying a quiet weight of truth. Both of them understood that their connection had evolved far beyond obligation. It was built on mutual respect, understanding, and the shared experiences that had shaped their recent months. The next few weeks continued to solidify this bond. They cooked meals together, sharing tasks and conversation, finding joy in the simplicity of collaboration. Asen began to notice the subtle ways Sana anticipated his needs without being intrusive, preparing his favorite tea exactly how he liked it, arranging the living space to be comfortable, and even offering quiet encouragement when he seemed stressed. He realized that these acts were not just practical, they were gestures of care, trust, and emotional presence. Sana, on her part, felt a growing sense of belonging. She no longer felt like an outsider attempting to repay a life-saving act. She felt like a partner in the shared rhythm of daily existence. The apartment had become more than a shelter. It was now a home in the truest sense, a place where both of them could be themselves without fear of judgment or misunderstanding. Yet, life was never without challenges. One afternoon, as Asen returned from work, he found a small problem in the apartment. A leak had developed in the kitchen sink, causing water to drip onto the floor. At first, he felt a flash of frustration, but then he noticed Sana, calm and collected, handling the situation. She quickly placed a bucket under the leak, turned off the main valve, and began to organize tools for repair. Her composure in the face of the problem reminded him how much she had grown and how capable she was. He stepped back, silently observing, feeling a quiet pride in her ability to handle difficulties with grace. The incident also highlighted how naturally they had come to support each other. Asen joined her, handing her tools and offering suggestions, and together they worked efficiently, their cooperation almost seamless. It was a simple problem, yet the way they faced it together reflected the depth of their evolving relationship. That evening after the repair was complete, they sat down to share a simple meal. Sana looked at him thoughtfully. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked quietly. Asen considered her question. "I do. Life isn't going to stop giving us challenges. But I think whatever comes, we can face it together. We've already learned that." Sana nodded, a soft smile on her lips. "Yes, and I think that's enough for now. We don't have to have all the answers yet. We just have to keep being honest with each other." The months passed, each day weaving new layers of trust, comfort, and subtle affection. They developed routines that were neither forced nor mechanical but natural extensions of their shared life. Morning coffee, casual conversations during chores, quiet evenings reading or watching the city lights outside. They became the small, treasured moments that defined their bond. Asen began to notice how her presence transformed the apartment into a space of warmth and light. There was laughter, gentle teasing, and a growing sense of emotional safety. He realized that he no longer felt isolated or burdened by silence. Sana's presence had taught him to appreciate connection in its simplest forms, the shared smiles, the thoughtful gestures, and the quiet understanding that neither of them needed to be perfect to matter to the other. Sana, meanwhile, felt a profound sense of growth. She no longer viewed her time in the apartment solely as repayment for a debt. She understood that her life, her choices, and her efforts now had meaning beyond obligation. She had learned resilience, courage, and the value of genuine connection. And in Asen, she found not just the man who had saved her life, but someone who inspired trust, respect, and quiet companionship. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony watching the sun set over the city, Sana spoke softly. "I used to think that life was about surviving, about paying back debts, about keeping my head down. But now, I see that it's about trust, connection, and the people we allow into our lives." Asen smiled gently, his hand finding hers. "I used to think life was about order, routine, and solitude. But now, I see it's about the moments we share, the understanding we offer, and the people who make it worth living." The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of months of shared experiences, challenges, and growth. In that quiet moment, both of them understood that their bond was no longer defined by obligation, fear, or uncertainty. It was defined by choice, care, and the deep, unspoken understanding that they had found something rare and meaningful in each other. As weeks turned into months, Asen and Sana continued to build a life together, small step by small step. They celebrated minor victories, faced problems together, and shared dreams for the future, however uncertain they might be. Their home had become a sanctuary, a space where both could grow, reflect, and find comfort in one another. And while they knew that life would continue to present challenges, they also knew that they were no longer alone. The lessons of the past, grief, fear, and uncertainty, had prepared them for the present, where trust, care, and companionship held more value than anything else. In the quiet moments of daily life, in the small gestures of shared responsibility, and in the gentle acknowledgement of each other's presence, Asen and Sana found a new beginning. It was a beginning not born from obligation, but from connection, mutual respect, and the simple, enduring power of human kindness. One evening, as the city lights twinkled in the distance and a gentle breeze flowed through the apartment, Asen looked at Sana and said, "You've changed my life in ways I never expected, not because of repayment, but because of who you are." Sana smiled, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the room. "And you've changed mine, not because you saved me, but because you believed in me." The words hung between them, unspoken yet deeply understood. They had come a long way from that first awkward encounter in the kitchen, where fear and uncertainty had dominated. Now they shared a quiet, steadfast bond, one built on honesty, trust, and the enduring recognition that life was richer when shared with someone who truly understood you. And as they sat together, side by side, the past seemed less burdensome, the future less uncertain, and the present filled with quiet, meaningful joy. They had survived fear, faced challenges, and grown stronger together. And in that they found the promise of every new day, a life not defined by debt or obligation, but by connection, respect, and the simple, profound beauty of shared human experience.